Good evening.
Good evening. This is the January 22nd, 2020 meeting of the Moscow Planning and Zoning Commission. Welcome, everybody, and a special welcome to our newest commissioner, Rich Beebe. We're glad to have you with us. And I'm sitting in tonight for our chair, Wendy McClure, who is on the phone down at the other end of the dais there. So, the first order of business is approval of the minutes from the January 8th meeting. Do we have any corrections, deletions, additions? Okay, would entertain a motion to approve.
So move.
Okay, Nels and second,
Second.
and Scott seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And abstentions? Okay, minutes are approved. Next item on the agenda is the public comment period. If anybody would like to address the commission, we take 15 minutes out of the meeting this evening, but it can't be any item that is before, on the agenda or before the commission this evening. So, anybody wish to speak? Okay, we'll move to the next item. It's public hearing, proposal for preliminary subdivision plat of a 10.22 acre parcel located at 2350 Trail Road and 2175 North Mountain View Road within the area of City Impact Sunrise Estates Edition. And we'll start with a presentation from Mike.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Commissioners. So before you tonight, we have a request from Daryl Paul for a couple pieces of property located at 2350 Trail Road and 2175 North Mountain View Road, and that's in the area City Impact. So looking at proposing to subdivide a 10.22 acre parcel into two lots, the westerly being 5.16 acres and the easterly being 5.05 acres in size, and they're referring to this subdivision plat as Sunrise Estates Edition. You may recall back in 2018, there was the westerly 5.16 acre parcel was rezoned from the former ag forest zone to the farm ranch zone to end up facilitating this subdivision plat. And just to remind you of the Area City Impact Agreement, we conduct one public hearing and then make a recommendation on to Latah County, and the county ends up making the final decisions on matters within the Area City Impact. So this is the property at the center of your screen. You can see the two proposed parcels. So this is the one area, 10.22 acres in size, and this would be the easterly 5.16 acres and the easterly 5.05 acres there. So it's primarily surrounded by agricultural land as well as rural residential properties, primarily single family. Mountain View Road heading north-south here, and then Trail Road heading east-west to the south of these properties. Just a closer view of the property, you can see there's a number of outbuildings, and then there is one existing house on the easterly property that's accessed off of Mountain View Road. These buildings are barns and just other outbuildings associated with the former agricultural operation. So look at the plan, land use designation of this property. It's designated as rural and agricultural. To the south, we have auto urban residential in the kind of lighter shade of yellow. So looking at what the agricultural designation states in the comp plan, it's intended to allow continued use of agricultural purposes with allowances for limited residential development at low densities. Residential development options allow septic well, septic public water where applicable and warranted at very low densities consistent with agricultural character of the areas. And then it points us to the ag forest or the farm ranch zones as being appropriate for that particular designation. So this is the current zoning configuration of the area. So if you recall, this was the property that was rezoned previously to farm ranch and then entirely surrounded by the ag forest zoning district. So looking at the farm ranch zone, it's intended to permit current agricultural, outdoor recreation, and other open land uses to be maintained, and at the same time to set minimum standards for the development of similar new uses in order that this open zoning district be protected against spasmodic, disorderly, indiscriminate development until such time as another appropriate use of the land of the zoning district has been determined. Minimum lot size is 3 acres, and the minimum lot width is 125 feet. And I just would also like to point out the thoroughfare plan for this area that the county also adopted as well. Has Trail Road as well as Mountain View Road only designated as minor arterial streets, end up connecting further to the west to Orchard as far as Trail Road, and then Mountain View Road ends up continuing north. So this is the subdivision plat. You can see the 2 properties, Lot 1 and Lot 2. There was a previous recommendation for the rezone to Farm Ranch that a 10-foot additional right-of-way dedicated along Trail Road, and so you can see that's been accommodated for within the right-of-way shown on the south side of the property. Another recommendation coming from our engineering department is that similar dedication get the road up to minor arterial standards, be dedicated along Mountain View Road for future expansion of that roadway. It's currently, I believe, 50 feet in width. We're just recommending an additional 10 feet on the west side in order to get to the 70-foot right-of-way width for minor arterial. So with that, staff's recommended the City of Moscow Planning and Zoning Commission conduct a public hearing and put forth a recommendation of approval of the proposed preliminary plat to Latah County with that one condition that we just discussed. The applicant shall dedicate sufficient right-of-way along the full frontage of property adjacent to Mountain View Road to provide 35 feet of 35 feet of width west of the existing center line of Mountain View Road to meet the existing minor arterial street standard. And I'd certainly be able to answer any questions that you might have.
So, Commissioners, anybody have questions for Mike?
I was just, can't remember well, but 70 feet is a right-of-way that we go for?
For a minor arterial, it's actually larger, but we thought it was unreasonable to request a larger right-of-way. We could accommodate certainly a minor arterial within that 70-foot right-of-way.
So it's a little less than what we ideally.
Half the street is correct.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? Okay. Oh, Joel?
One of the pictures shows the proposed lot line running through the middle of one of the barns. What are the implications of that? Is that purely something that the owners will have to deal with in their own way?
It's just a matter of when you overlay the property lines in area photos. If you look at the actual preliminary plat itself, it shows a 10-foot setback off of the barn structure. So in the upper right-hand corner of the preliminary plat, they have the building footprints on there, and it identifies 10 feet between the property line and the barn, which meets setback requirements.
Yeah, I get an impression that that may just be a lean-to
No,
on it as well, you know, because it's not the same size as the building itself.
I think it was probably a camper at one point in time.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, Mike, thank you. With that, we will open the public hearing, and we'd like to hear first from those in support of the project or the owners of the project. Please state your name and address for the record, please.
Yes, my name is Aaron Repke. Address is 530 South Asbury Street, suite number 2 here in Moscow. I'm an attorney here on behalf of the owner of one of the properties, Darrell Paul, who has submitted the application for the preliminary subdivision. Mr. Ray's done a nice job of presenting, and so I'm just here to answer any you guys might have for me on behalf of the owner.
Anybody have any questions? Joel?
you're comfortable with the proposed straight right-of-way proposals?
Yes.
Okay, very good. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Scott, you have any comments you'd like to provide?
Scott Becker with Hodgin Associates, 405 South Washington. Once again, I was just here in case there are some questions that come up. Aaron might not be able to answer. I could answer. So otherwise, yeah, absolutely, Mike did a great job again. So.
Any questions for?
So the building deal isn't an issue?
It's not an issue, no. I think. Good question, though, because it does, these aerial photos are deceiving sometimes. So.
Okay, great.
All right, thank you very much.
And any other testimony, either in opposition or neutral?
Hello, I'm Peter Garraway. I actually own the property on the eastern side. And I mostly had a question, just trying to get an understanding. I actually spoke with Mike a few days ago in regards to how this affects my property, because this was when I purchased the property back in 2016. It was contingent on the land being divided already, so this looks like it's getting addressed as the whole plot, as 10 acres. But when it was purchased, it was actually separated into 5 acres, separate parcels. So I'm wondering if there's any effect on my property or anything I might be concerned about.
Mike, do you have any comments on that?
It shouldn't have any effect. I mean, really, it was just, I guess, rectifying a situation that in order to get a building permit on the westerly parcel, they needed to go through a subdivision plat in order to be able to issue a permit. Anybody can go up to the county and quit claim any portion of property to somebody else, but it doesn't necessarily mean the city or the county recognizes that as a buildable lot. And so this is all that this is doing, is essentially going through a subdivision plat in order to be able to issue a building permit and recognize the westerly lot as a separate lot. So it sounds like it's following through with the condition of the sale, is what it sounds like to me.
That's your house to the west?
To the east, yes.
Oh, east, excuse me. I don't know my directions.
Yeah, that's okay.
Sorry.
Yes, so it just wasn't clear, because if I go to the treasurer's site or the GSI site, it's already subdivided. So it just wasn't clear to me how it's still being recognized as a 10-acre plat, I guess.
Was your question answered satisfactorily, or your understanding?
Well, yeah, I mean, subdivision lots are different than parcels that the county assessor assigns up at the courthouse. So if you go up to the county courthouse and you look at this property, all it's going to show is a 10.22 acre piece that has no subdivision plat on it. In order to officially divide those into 2 lots, you need to go through a subdivision plat. The county assessor will just assign a parcel and a number to anything, but it doesn't necessarily mean that's really the record for that property. So,
Okay. Understood. And then to clear up any confusion, that where that looks like the line is drawing through the back barn that's actually on the left side of the divide is a container, so detached from the barn.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other testimony?
I'm Mary Lewandowski, and I live 2 houses north of Peter's house. And I just want to, because I'm very ignorant about these things. I've lived there over 25 years, and I just want to make sure that what he is selling, he wants to put single dwellings on it? Nothing like apartment buildings or anything, because it's rural, correct?
I believe that's correct.
it would just be eligible for 1 single-family dwelling.
Okay. And that would consist of like a family, not like 21 people, in like a residential sojourners, or like a Mercy house or anything like that?
Yeah, it would have to meet the definition of family. I mean, if there were 21 people and they were all related, then technically they could, but not unrelated, no.
Okay. Thank you.
It is a troubling thought, isn't it?
Okay, thank you very much. Any other testimony?
Mike Church, 1041 Lion Road. I guess it's more of a question just to satisfy some curiosity. Can you go back, or maybe I can, I don't know how to do that, but it looks like the record of survey for the two parcels there shows a 4.7 and a 4, actually, it's slightly more than that. And it looked like the number was different. Is this going to change the size of either one of those parcels because of dedication or anything, or did I read that wrong?
It looks, at least on what I've got here, it says the lot on the west side, 5.16 acres, 4.88 after right-of-way dedication. And the other one shows as 5.05, 4.43 after right-of-way dedication. So, Mike, are we reading that correctly?
Yeah, I think I had an earlier version on the screen actually, but the one in your packet, that's correct. So it's a little confusing because the county typically does things a little bit differently than the city does. When you dedicate right away in the city, you're actually dedicating the real property. In the county, you typically retain the real property, so everybody owns still to the center line of the street, but you retain, but a right-of-way easement, it goes across that property for right-of-way access. So it should still maintain the 5.16 and the 5.05. It'll just be less the right-of-way that an easement goes across that property for.
And that was done at the time in 2015 when they recorded that survey already? Or?
Probably not.
Okay.
I mean, there was already a right-of-way easement going across that property. So if you look at the taxes at the county, it'll have the acreage, and then it'll be like less, however much right-of-way is in the easement on the property. But what happened was there was with the farm ranch rezone that happened in 2018, there was a recommendation to the county that an additional 10 feet of right-of-way in the easement be dedicated. And it looks like Mr. Becker's just carried that over to the adjacent lot, Mr. Garraway's as well, just because it's involved in this subdivision plat.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Any further testimony? Okay, with that, we will close the public hearing, and commissioners, how would you like to proceed?
Well, I have a question. This is Wendy. I just have a question about the right-of-way in terms of the corridor from Mountain View. If it becomes a multimodal street with bike lanes, et cetera, will that right-of-way reduction still accommodate the aspirations for that cross-section of the street? Or that's my question, I guess.
It will. We just had really large right-of-way for the public utility easements on either side, and we had really large tree lawns that are included in that diagram, so we should still be able to fit bike lanes and two-way travel aisles in that 70-foot standard.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thanks, Wendy. Okay, any other questions or comments? All right, well, I guess we should proceed to, if anybody is interested in making a motion to approve the preliminary subdivision plat with conditions as presented.
I'll make a motion. I move that we recommend to the county the approval of this proposal with the suggested conditions based on the additional right-of-way that is needed.
Great, okay, do we have a second?
I'll second.
Oh, Scott beat you to it, Wendy.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay, so with that, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, and I guess we need to also then approve or direct staff to prepare the relevant standards and criteria.
So moved.
Joel moved.
Second.
Oh, Nels seconded. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, I guess we're all set. Congratulations.
So this is just sent on to the county, that's,
Right.
and remind me about how far from city limits is this? Is this half a mile or?
Quarter mile?
Quarter?
Half.
Yeah. Okay. I just didn't see a bigger map and I didn't look, but, okay.
Yeah.
More like
Cool.
half.
Great.
Go and
Good.
sin no more.
Thanks very much. Okay, we'll move on to the next agenda item. Mike, you're going to be up against small cell wireless facilities draft ordinance.
I emailed some comments in, I don't know if people got them, I was wondering if I could hand out a printed copy.
That would be great.
I know it's not a hearing, but.
Yeah, and I appreciate you sending them. I know at least some of it. Why don't you bring them on up, David?
Yeah, thank you.
And one of the things I was going to mention is, since this isn't yet at a public hearing stage, I've already got one here, pass that on. We won't take testimony tonight. However, I would really encourage you to continue to provide additional information as it comes into your hands, and pass it on to staff, and I suspect the ample opportunity to testify as this moves forward. I think we're going to have some interesting public hearings on this issue. So thanks, David. I really appreciate it. Okay, Mike?
Thank you. So, yeah, David mentioned it. We did receive some communication from citizens. David submitted a couple pieces here, and that I think Ann sent out, as well as there's a gentleman that mailed a copy of the city of Mill Valley had a ordinance that was passed in 2018 that I believe prohibited 5G within the city, and they're north of San Francisco is where that city is. So just wanted to make you aware of those. The draft ordinance is attached to your packet. We've taken our existing telecommunications ordinance and inserted small wireless facilities in order to address those within the ordinance. And so just going through at the very beginning, I think we've got a definition section that begins with the insertion of small wireless facilities. So we're defining, and it's defined as a telecommunications facility that meets each of the following conditions. The first, the structure on which the antenna facilities are mounted is 50 feet less in height, is no more than 10% taller than any other adjacent structure, or is not extended to a height of more than 10% above the height as a result of the co-location of new antenna facilities. So much smaller than the typical really large antenna towers that you see throughout the city. Each antenna, excluding associated antenna equipment, is no more than 3 cubic feet in volume. So controlling the size there. So if you think about a cubic foot, it's typically a basketball is what a cubic foot is. So, just envisioning the antenna box on the very top, the cylinder not exceeding essentially 3 basketballs in volume. All antenna equipment associated with the facility, excluding antennas, are cumulatively no more than 28 cubic feet. The facility does not require antenna structure registration under Part 17 FCC regulations, and the facility does not result in human exposure to radio frequency radiation in excess of the application safety standards specified in FCC Rule 0.1307B. So the FCC states, or has the limit, pretty much the threshold on how much radio frequency radiation a certain antenna can generate, and if it goes above that, then it's typically outlawed. So FCC would rule here as far as the radio frequency radiation, and we ended up getting a lot of these standards off of Denver. So they had a pretty thorough design standards document with elevation images of typical small cell facilities, and those were kind of the recommended sizes. And so we started out with these. We can certainly adjust as needed, but we figure we go with a baseline. Then we get into small wireless facility standards, have a applicability statement that these standards shall apply to the installation of new small wireless facilities antennas or co-location of small wireless facilities on existing antenna support structures. City Council may adopt additional small wireless facility design and construction standards by resolution, and the most restrictive provisions of either shall apply. So this is just thinking ahead. I mean, I don't think we have any reason right now in order to adopt a separate document with various construction standards. I just don't think we're at the point where we're going to get that many of these that we're going to need a diagram that shows exactly different types of poles, different types of lights, things like that. I think just with the narrative version of the standards not exceeding that size, I think that'll be sufficient, but we can, certainly discuss that if you'd like. So I guess I wanted to make one thing clear about the new small wireless facilities antennas. So that's going to be a new pole. So it won't be on the existing telephone pole or light pole. That'll be a pretty much a standalone structure. Let's see, similar to this. So one that's specifically just for small cell is what we're referring to there. Where it discusses co-location. So it's a little confusing that you think of co-location as already have an antenna on that structure, but it's not. It could be, but that's not the only way to co-locate. Co-location occurs essentially just when you put an antenna on any type of structure. It's called co-location. So when it's referring to the existing antenna support structures, that would essentially just be a support structure such as a light pole or a telephone pole. Could be on top of a building. That would be an antenna support structure. Not necessarily towers, they're support structures. So just wanted to clarify there. It's further on the definition section where we define co-location, and it's a little bit confusing sometimes when you think about it that way. So, and then approvals statement. Small wireless facilities shall be subject to administrative approval of the zoning administrator or their designee, subject to the construction standards, permit, and application process, and contained herein as established by resolution of the City Council.
Question. Is there any definitional problem with respect to saying small wireless facility? Is a G5 system the only small wireless facility technology out there? Is a Wi-Fi system a small wireless facility? Is a other kind of communication radio a small wireless
Well,
facility?
he's saying 50 feet
Yeah.
or 10 feet above
Yeah.
structures. That seems to be the two things.
Yeah, but well, I'm talking about other technologies. Citizen band radio is a wireless technology. Smaller than the kinds of towers we've been building for cell phone. Is it a widely understood term?
It seems to me that the key term in that is that the telecommunication facility, so wireless, small wireless, but it's associated with the telecommunication. For example, a CB radio or a ham radio wouldn't.
Well, CB radio is telecommunications.
Well, I guess it could be. I mean, it's a good point.
So what it comes down to, I believe, is commercial. So if you look into the definition of telecommunications facilities in our current ordinance, it states antenna towers, antenna support structures, antennas, and their ancillary facilities that are used to provide commercial wireless communications or telecommunications services. So it all comes down to the commercial delivery of telecommunications services.
Think of that. I don't have a better term, but yeah. And it's widely used, why I'm willing to accept that.
And then we go on to, say, the co-location upon existing antenna support structures. We go through that. Co-location of small wireless facilities upon existing antenna support structures shall be a permitted use subject to the following standards. So this is similar to what we do now with our current larger towers. We have a greater threshold. So on the current towers, the co-location is allowed by right so long as you don't protrude 18 feet above or 8 feet horizontally away from the antenna tower. And small cell being much smaller, so we're going to say here that the height of co-location antenna towers, the small wireless facility shall not extend more than 5 feet above and 2 feet away horizontally from the existing antenna support structure. And trimming of antennas and support equipment, all wireless facilities, antennas, antenna equipment, cabling shall be shielded from view by equipment and cable shrouds and or equipment enclosures that shall be colored gray or other similar color as approved by the city. So typically, if it's the Cobra head light poles and they have that color gray, it's probably what we're going to go with. But if there's something else and they're the black powder coated fluted ones that are in, historic kind of, incidental to downtown, obviously we would go with probably black for that. So whatever it fits in with the color of the pole, I think is largely what we would end up going with. And then we define a maximum number of shrouds. So only one equipment shroud containing all required small wireless facility equipment shall be installed per antenna support structure, with an exception that one additional shroud could be allowed per pole if the antenna is located within the second equipment shroud.
Mike, on that one, the C3, where it says except if there's a second antenna, a little bit further down, it's that next page, 6E, item 3, talks about the maximum number, but it doesn't specify the exception that's in the B3. So that would be, let's see, sections, let me get over here to it. So it says in the bottom of page 6, item E, maximum height, sorry, wrong.
Page 7.
Wrong ones. Okay, item 3 on page 7. Yeah, maximum number of shrouds, only one equipment shroud containing all required small wireless facility equipment shall be installed per antenna tower. I'm just thinking, in order to be consistent, we probably, I'm assuming, need to have the exception on that one as well.
I put a question mark.
Well,
there,
I
so
think,
noticed it.
so I think what we're saying here is, that's for new antenna towers. So we're saying that the new antenna towers, they really need to keep everything contained within the tower. That only one, they should be able to contain a lot of that within the tower itself, and they shouldn't need that many shrouds because they're not installing it on a telephone pole. It's all wood, and you can't run the wires in a telephone pole. So that's why we're being more stringent here.
Okay,
because if they're doing a new tower,
under
then they have the ability of,
Okay.
putting wire and everything through the inside of it. Okay. And then we go through shroud mounting method. Facility shrouds can either be on top or side mounted to existing antenna support structure or suspended from strand mounted to aerial cables as may be approved by the utility cable owner in accordance with the standards contained herein. Side, so this is, I think I have a diagram. So this is that example. So, side mounted to the existing utility pole, and then the ones where I think you see these already on some utility lines. They have, some type of equipment shroud that comes off every once in a while. So that's what we're talking about there. On the side-mounted ones, we're concerned with not obstructing pedestrian access if it's adjacent to sidewalks. We state that where side-mounted equipment shrouds are placed above adjacent sidewalks, a minimum clearance of 8 feet shall be maintained between the bottom of the shroud and the mounting hardware and the walking surface. So 8 feet's pretty similar. It's actually the same dimension that we use for, say, downtown, where you have projecting signs or awnings. They have to be at least 8 feet in the air to provide the clearance below. So it would be similar there. Where side-mounted shrouds overhang the adjacent curb or roadway, a minimum clearance of 14 feet shall be maintained between the bottom of the equipment or mounting hardware to the roadway surface. The antenna is mounted to the side of the pole. It shall be located inside a maximum shroud of 5.5 cubic feet in volume with a 16-inch maximum width. And then top-mounted, if the antenna shroud is located on top of the support structure, outer diameter should be 14 inches maximum, and the antenna shroud shall be no more than 5 feet tall, including antenna, radio head, mounting bracket, and all other hardware necessary for the complete installation. So, that's what we're talking about here is this portion, the cantenna on the very top. The diameter can't exceed 14 inches, and it can't be more than 5 feet tall. Coming off the top of the fixture. And we have a obstruction of lighting. So when you have them installed on existing light poles, and you have the luminaire and the mast arm coming out, we don't want the equipment shroud, located on this side where it's going to obstruct the street light coming down. So we have a statement there about the installations on the antenna support structures containing streetlights can't obstruct, interfere with, or diminish the light distribution and lighting levels of the street light fixture. And then we go on. This is replacement combination light in antenna towers. So this would be, just looking at replacing the entire light in antenna tower. So existing antenna support structures such as light poles may be replaced. New equivalent combination structures intend to accommodate the intended function of the existing antenna support structure, accommodate small wireless facilities. And then we go through some following standards. The replacement antenna support structure is of the same quality, color, design, and style, so to be consistent with other existing support structures in the surrounding area, subject to the approval of the zoning administrator. So this is the example of, downtown where we're going for the cohesive style of light fixture with the black powder coated. They wouldn't necessarily be able to replace it with some, Cobra Head coated gray fixture. It would have to be consistent with the area, and so we'd be able to review that. The replacement antenna support structure is the same height as the existing support structure, excluding the top-mounted small wireless facility antenna, which may exceed the height of the existing support structure, but it has to comply with the standards that we just went through, the 14-inch diameter, 5-foot total height. Replacement antenna support structure should be designed to internally accommodate all necessarily small wireless supporting equipment in accordance with these standards required for new small wireless facilities. The replacement of decorative and/or historic light fixtures shall not be permitted unless the applicant can demonstrate that the proposed replacement antenna support structure will not disrupt or interfere with the visual theme and style of lighting within the surrounding area.
Okay, thought that that might be the spot. I had mentioned the last time about the urban green infrastructure and making sure that we don't compromise our trees or property owners that have landscape trees. We wouldn't want to be damaging their property. It would devalue their property. And so since that's where you have the historic light fixtures, that might be where we want to say something about maintaining the integrity of the urban infrastructure. I didn't see anything in here that referred to it.
So you're thinking,
Have D about the historic light fixtures. We might have an E that refers to urban green infrastructure, which is a system. It's not just an aesthetic system. It's a conservation, cooling system, all the things that the trees provide.
so you're thinking if they replace that and they end up going 5 feet taller because of an antenna on top of it, and it ends up requiring the pruning of a older tree.
Well, I don't know that I was thinking in terms of replacing the whole pole. Maybe that's not where it belongs, but somewhere in here. Just want to protect urban infrastructure.
You know, this is Wendy. I scanned through the Mill Valley standards, that I looked at. I mean, unfortunately, I didn't see them until pretty close to the meeting time, but they do have a section on exactly what you're talking about for you. Might be something to look at
Yeah,
in terms of impact on trees.
I looked at the Mill Valley thing months ago after a presentation. Really where I saw it, to keep in mind that we want to
Right.
not
There's
compromise it.
a starting point to look at
Yeah,
for the concern.
right. It's complex. I don't know where to tell you to put it.
I haven't. Yeah, I mean, I haven't. I got, like I said, like Wendy said, I received this shortly before the meeting as well, so I haven't had a chance to look through it. But we can look through it and maybe think of a good place to put it, and back next time and talk about it.
Yeah.
That work?
Mhm.
So yeah, this is kind of an example of what we could probably see here with the replacement of the light pole, and you have the antenna at the top, and then you have hopefully the equipment within the cabinet at the very bottom of it instead of one of the shroud boxes on the side. And then we went to new small wireless facility antenna towers, maximum height. No new small wireless tower may exceed 40 feet in height unless a conditional use permit is received to exceed this height limitation. Antenna and equipment shrouding, new standalone or newer in a replacement combination light and small wireless antenna tower shall be fully enclosed. We need to add a D there. And contain all the small wireless communications equipment, cabling, and antennas, and shall be of a style and color that is consistent with other similar light poles and fixtures within the surrounding area as approved by the city. Looking at the maximum number of shrouds, only one equipment shroud containing all required small wireless facility equipment shall be installed per antenna tower. Minimum spacing between towers can't be located no closer than 250 feet from another small wireless facility antenna tower. The separation required shall not apply to co-locations upon existing antenna support structures or replacement combination light and small wireless antenna towers.
So question, we've been talking about 500 feet between these small cell towers or additions to the lights and so forth. Why do we have 250 here?
Well, I think it's presuming that you have multiple providers.
Let me just play on that. When this starts happening, Can you perceive how many people are going to be coming to town? In other words, AT&T, Verizon, boom, 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 all those names? Everybody will have their own deal, do you think?
It's going to go to the larger cities first, and, we're a rural market, so
Sure.
I don't.
No, I understand.
No, I think
And we need to send Wendy down to California to check it out. I was just trying to get, as you've chatted about this, because I don't talk about this topic over my breakfast, so I don't know. I was just, and then, Victoria pointed out the differential between the 500 and 250, and I was asking the same question about, we started out saying 50-foot pole, and then you shifted to a 40-foot pole. Why did we shift down to 40?
Well, yeah, we define a small cell as anything less than 50 feet, but we're saying here that anything above 40 feet requires a conditional use permit.
Oh, and the 50 was just in a description.
That was just the definition of small cell. So we're just saying that you need a conditional use permit if you exceed the 40 feet in height.
so. A pole that has co-location on it is likely to have 3 providers. And if there are 4 providers out there, then that 4th one, or a new 5th one, or a new 6th one that turns into a new industry needs another pole. And that's why we're now saying every 250 feet we may have these things.
Correct. Yeah. The range is 500 feet. So, depending upon where they are, you certainly could have a coverage issue there.
It seems, doesn't it, that if you were in New York City, where every building is 8 to 10 to 20 stories, it would look like they'd need more towers than in a town like Moscow where the houses are 30 feet high. So you can see a difference there for sure.
Yeah.
And then all the things in between, those two.
Do we know if the equipment within a shroud that would be allowed on a pole can only service one company or one provider, or can they be shared like we see with other wireless facilities?
I don't know the answer to that question. I can certainly do a little more research on that to see.
Well, as we move forward, it might be helpful for us to have maybe a little better sense of the technology and what they're going to do. Because even at 250 feet, you're
They're proliferating.
well, you could, but you're still going to limit the number of providers that could be within a particular range. On the other hand, like you're saying, Mike, we're a rural market. How?
Well, and then, a typical block is 600 feet, right? So there could possibly be that there's no other, the frequency of telephone poles or light poles within that area in order to locate, may not, there may not be the frequency of
Right.
those in any given block.
Yeah.
And then you'd have the gap there, so that's just,
So a typical block would likely have one on each corner plus mid-block, so every block is going, how many is that?
Well,
Three,
could be
6,
three.
10? No, you gotta go the other
Oh,
direction
that's-
too.
okay, yeah.
You're talking about having 10 cell towers per block.
no, it'd be like 1 or 2.
But
You
I
have to
don't.
go the other direction too.
'Cause the coverage
It's not
is-
just going east and west, it's gotta go north and south too. So,
You're talking about the whole block, not
whole
just.
block, yeah.
Not just the-
Victoria, other than in rare cases, I don't see, we have to be careful about talking about suburban blocks and city blocks. But blocks, basically, Wendy and I were talking about this a couple times ago. mostly are in that 250, 260 category. And it would look like in most cities, you'd find a pole at the end of every block. There are exceptions of kinds of places that have longer blocks, but once you get into suburban world, then you don't have the concern, because most, at least houses, are typically not taller than 40 feet, and a 40 feet thing could go the 500 feet wherever it is. It seems, you can imagine that we're going to have more little poles around our lives.
Yeah, well,
In
you
the
had,
next 20
someone had said
years.
500 feet as a block.
Huh?
Someone had said 500 feet as a block,
Yeah,
so.
well,
So if you're
someone
saying
didn't know what they're,
300 feet
in my
is a
mind, they
block.
don't know what they're talking about.
Oh, because I know the blocks aren't all the same. I'm
I've
trying to
counted blocks for
visualize
years,
this.
and mostly 250, 260 is the way life is.
But if a
Whether you're
block-
talking about Phoenix or, you know, it's true that Salt Lake City is different.
Yeah.
But,
If a block is 250 feet long, it's probably only 100, 120 feet deep, or maybe 200 feet deep. It's the depth of two abutting lots. It's not 250 feet,
but you can easily
except
see,
in some old parts of Moscow.
while we, those of us in little states like Idaho, you'd think we'd want to get some expert from the big city that's had the experience and bring them, you know, to Boise or whatever, and you can go down to Boise and listen in, and, you know, you would think that the experience is going to be learned by these larger cities sooner than us, and then we can.
So that was something we had brought up before too, that you were going to give us some pictures and background, not in terms of 5G, but in terms of blocks, because we were going to need to talk about blocks, because I don't automatically visualize how these blocks lay out. And so that would be helpful to have some idea.
I'll do something for you, Victoria. I've been studying blocks for years and years and years, and I've got some great images. I'll bring some stuff.
You know, Mike,
I'll give it to Michael.
I'm thinking that there's a lot that we don't know about how this is going to move forward, and we're not going to resolve it tonight, obviously. But as we do move forward with the ordinance, it seems to me like we're going to have to build some flexibility into it so that as the environment changes, we can react to it, and in some cases, maybe to curtail a little bit. We don't want to, I don't think we want 4 or 5 providers on every block. On the other hand, I think we're a long way from this getting rolled out. I mean, 5G nationally is a long ways from getting rolled out. But anyway, I just, you know, I suspect we're going to be having some further discussions, but somehow, as we're moving forward with this, let's try to think in terms of enough flexibility that we could
React is a good word.
react if we need to. I mean, I know we're not getting ready for a public hearing quite yet, so.
Sure.
I have could I ask, David, you brought this in. Did you put this together, or somebody, you found this from somebody?
I put it together.
What's the, I mean, it seems, just glancing at it, that a few years ago, the FCC was thinking about just having no rules at all. We can just go and spill our water anywhere. We can do anything we want to do. And then the court said, no, that's not so good. Maybe we need some guidelines. And the court came back with another ruling. I was just wondering if you would, what did you think this paper was doing for us? Can you put it in just a few short words? What do you think we should pay attention to on these 2 pages?
Well, yes, you're right. The Ninth District Court and the Court of the DC, we're looking at two different recent court cases against FCCs, saying that the municipalities can't regulate on basis of environment or health or various other things. The court has said that that is not correct, and FCC has to go back and do environmental reviews and not putting it on the feet of the municipalities, but at the federal level. Next month, one of our UI legal professors will be speaking to the League of Women Voters on the legal aspects of this. So, and you might want to just talk to him, Professor Richard Seaman. So you might interview him on the legal aspect part of that, if that's the piece you were asking about. And their liability issues. If I may, I had one question for Mike. Is this all for city right-of-way, or is it distinguished between private property? Many municipalities look at both clearly and regulate them differently.
Yeah, we're intended to cover everything here, public and private.
And they'd all be the same, because I didn't see any
Yeah.
notice of difference. That takes term in either place.
Yeah.
And I'll have more information to pass along too. But
Great. Thanks, David. Yeah, Mike, we keep hijacking your presentation.
Oh, no, that's fine. Yeah, the discussion's good. I think I'm pretty close to the end. I think, so we're looking at just the new antenna tower here. Looking at maximum number of shrouds, only one, and we had the 250 feet. And then antenna tower design. So any new small wireless antenna tower shall consist of a 10-inch galvanized straight steel pole, powder-coated black over zinc paint with a foundation base of 16 inches in diameter, designed to accommodate all necessary supporting equipment, and a top shroud of no more than 14 inches in diameter. All tower components and antenna shrouds shall be painted a matching black color. So that's really just going with the design that we're going towards in the city. Is just the black color, and so it'd be similar to this if you just had the freestanding antenna tower. And then there's an example of the light pole one. So, and that was really all I had as far as the additions. To
I've
the
got
ordinance.
two things. One, just a real nitpicky one on page 2, under 3I. We have kind of a double parallel construction. The structure on which the antenna facilities are mounted is 50. You can leave off one of the is's if you want to. That's on 3I.
3IA.
Well, yeah, it's
And it's
It's
also
just-
C
it's-
and B. Yeah, okay, it's all of them, right.
So 3I.
yeah, it says the structure on which the antenna facilities are mounted is colon, and then
Oh, yeah.
is 50
Yeah, it's
feet,
redundant.
is no
Oh.
more, is not, you don't need, you can eliminate either the 3 is's or the 1 is.
Okay, got it.
The other thing I wanted to comment on, and we certainly, this will be something as we go forward, but in that same down further in that same page, the facility does not result in human exposure to radio frequency radiation excess of the safety standards, blah, blah, blah. Who measures those, and who, in a sense, audits the compliance with that, and do we need to build that into the ordinance?
I believe they're supposed to demonstrate that to the FCC, but I can get more information about that.
And are these, is this equipment, Scott, you might know this, is it something that would be prone to a variance over time, or is it aged?
No, I don't.
Okay.
Curious, so.
Well, we
So I
might,
think as part of their licensure with the FCC, in order to operate commercial telecommunications facilities, in order to be in compliance, they have to demonstrate that the equipment doesn't exceed those levels, I believe is how it works, but I can get more information.
well, it
on
might
that.
be interesting to see if basically forces the city into doing some kind of compliance testing. I would hope not, but it might be kind of an onerous task to have.
Well, even before, this is Wendy, I've been reading a few articles about the health concerns, et cetera, and they're all over the map. Honestly, the science is somewhat. But what I think ultimately would be helpful is if there is sort of a recommended limit of human exposure to radio frequency. Well, the distance from the source is as you get 2 feet away, it's the square root of 1 foot away. So the farther you get away, the exposure radio frequency really drops drastically. So what would be helpful is some kind of graphic that shows kind of what our standards are, where the area of, bad radio frequency is, and what that looks like in relation. You know what I mean? So we have a pole size or design that we're recommending, and the mounting heights, etc. And what's the umbrella of radio frequency? How far does it transfer out? I mean, we're talking in our subdivision ordinance of moving houses 10 feet from the sidewalk. So, where are we in that? That I haven't been able to find anything online that shows that, but there must be something. I mean, somehow the FCC has determined how much radio frequency you can be exposed to, and there must be some kind of distance from the source where that limit drops off, and that would be nice to know, so.
Well, and Wendy, I agree, and I think that as we move forward here, we're already seeing pretty considerable interest in the health issues related to this.
Right.
And so I think we need to be prepared as we move the conversation forward to have some answers to some of those kinds of questions, so.
Okay, and along with that, I was thinking this past, because we tend to think, it's up there. We talked about having it's up high, the antenna's up high, keeping any potential limit, radiation or pulses and all that kind of stuff as far away from, we're thinking street level. But like Wendy said, the sidewalk setbacks aren't, some of them are shorter, and so I'm thinking second-story buildings, three-story buildings, apartments, condominiums. Now, they're up here at the level where the antennas may be, so that their level is straight out, not down, if you understand what I mean. And I don't know what all those numbers are, but the person on the 3rd floor or the 4th floor is actually up in the air closer to the antenna, where we have a tendency to think about it down here on the ground, and I don't want to forget those people. And if we put these on top of buildings like downtown, then anybody who lives on the 3rd floor, you just got a roof structure, whatever the depth of that roof structure is between them and the antenna that's on the roof. They're very close. So those were a couple
Yeah,
thoughts that came up in the last couple of weeks.
I think this will be part of the continuing discussion, but, so Mike, what direction do you need from us at this point to move what we've got here forward?
I have another thing I wanted to bring up.
Well, what else would you like? Would you like, it sounds like some of the environmental impacts, Victoria wanted to take a look at that, and I can certainly look through the Mill Valley ordinance and.
Yeah, I was going to suggest that one as maybe a shared reading, or anybody who has the energy to read through it in more detail. It's pretty long, just to get a sense of what they've done, because they certainly are much closer to the tech center of the world, and also a community that really has high design standards. So, in terms of aesthetics, so it's kind of a combination there.
Well,
so I think it probably provides a good example if people want to read it.
Yeah.
It would help to inform our discussion, so.
I think that's a good idea. I think we need to read it, just to learn more about the issue. And so maybe that would be the assignment for us, and then we can put it back on the agenda for further discussion, either next meeting or the meeting after.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, it sounds like there's a number of questions that I can try to find the answers to, and we
Okay.
can, in the meantime, read that. I mean, I think we have an additional week between this meeting and the next meeting, just the way the calendar falls, so we can have that read by next
So I
meeting and
had
have a
another
discussion.
question, in terms of if we put them on the roofs, and I'm thinking, when I'm at the rec center and I'm walking, I don't run, walking around the track, I'm looking over at the tower and I see those shrouds and they're on the side of the building. I would not want our historic buildings to have these shrouds stuck on the side of the building. They're going to need to be on the roofs, correct? This building has them up there.
Typically where they're at, yeah.
Okay, so we're not going to.
And we have a number here.
Yeah,
The
we got 'em
Connell
up here.
has a lot of antenna towers, Theophilus Tower
That's what I'm
and U of
talking
I.
about.
It's usually the tallest building historically, just because of 3G, 4G. You know, you need these really large towers, and that's why it's usually on the tallest building downtown or on the university's campus. But these are a little bit different because the range is so small.
Okay.
So they're not going to want it way up in the air.
Gotcha.
They're going to want it closer to the ground so you can,
Okay.
you know,
I
utilize
see that all the time when I'm there, and I'm going, I don't want our historic buildings to have gums with shrouds stuck on the sides of our buildings all over the place, but that
So
may be the
Nelson, you had
case.
a, yeah.
So, when do you think the first request for building one of these little towers, a 5G thing, is going to come to our area? Has it already come?
Well, we've already been contacted by a company that's, requested to enter into a franchise agreement for small cell in the city. I think it's a company that goes to rural markets and looks at building the infrastructure and then having larger cellular providers, use the infrastructure to generate their 5G network. How close they are to requesting small cell towers in the city, I don't know. I think a lot of times they just want to get in on the ground floor and want to have an agreement with the city, so they're able to provide those services. And then who knows when they would move forward with looking at, installing any type of small cell antenna tower in town. I don't know.
So I think we talked about this the other time, but I need to I need to ask it again. So how does this microwave get from Seattle to Pullman? That's 300 miles. That's more than 250 feet. So how does it get from big center to little town? You telling me that there's going to be poles every 500 feet all the way to over the mountain?
I think you got an answer right out here.
I can actually answer a little bit about your first question. I don't know much about the second question, except there's a lot of technologies under 5G, ranging from the small cell here, and they're calling the 5G SpaceX satellite sweep out there. That's 5G as well. So I don't know if they have some technology to go between cities. That's an interesting question, but I can answer your first question a bit.
We're all covered by a satellite. Boom. It's coming to every one of our towns. So you see how confused I could be?
It is confusing.
Well, doesn't it probably come via fiber?
It's fiber optic lines is how it comes over here.
Fiber
But
optic.
it's like any other
Gotcha.
trip, I mean, you make
Just
it.
like cable TV.
Yeah, you make
Boom.
you make a trip from Moscow to Seattle, you don't have the same service. If you look at your phone, you can tell sometimes you don't have service. That's all coming from the really large towers. Right? And so they're not going to pay to install 5G from here to Seattle because there's not going to be the number of people that are paying for it in that area. It's just too, the population
That's
isn't
why
there.
sometimes I wonder, why are we worried about this for next week if it's not coming for 5 years?
It's going to come.
it'll be-
Oh, it's
I
going
can-
to
I
be
can-
before 5 years.
I can
Oh,
address
yeah.
that.
Okay.
Nels, David Hall again, for the record. In August, I was told that Verizon was up in Jim Lyle Rotary Park preparing for 5G, which I don't think it should be in the parks at all. But they told a neighbor that they were putting the structures up, ready to go. So Vista's ready to jump on it. I think my understanding is that it was going to go, they would go onto the water towers, and there was already antennas there, so there's very limited regulations they have to go through, and especially with the current code, without the 5G, that they may not even have to ask permission. I'm not sure what they need, but it seems very limited because there's already stuff on that tower. But Vista was there in August preparing
This
for
coming
5G.
August?
This past
Last
August, they were up there.
So,
Well, you can see where I'm coming from is I'd like, you've been really wonderful at showing us the details this close, but I want to know about the bigger picture, okay? And I feel like if you don't have that, if you don't feel comfortable with that, I would be happy to hopefully bring somebody to, I don't know if council wants to hear that too. Be an interesting thing to have somebody give us a broader picture. I seem a little bit old-fashioned. I'm slow.
So,
So you're just interested in the network itself?
Yeah.
How
And-
the network works? And
Well, I don't care so much about how it works, other than the fact that you're making it sound like it's just rolling in on us, like it's a storm coming, and I was trying to figure out how the storm,
I think it is
Gets
coming.
here.
I think it's coming.
yeah.
I don't think there's any question. And a university town
yes.
is prime place for that to happen.
Well, you'd
So,
think,
yeah.
right.
So Wendy, a quick question for you. Should we go ahead and put this on the agenda for the next meeting then?
If
Further
people think
discussion?
they have time to read, do some research, or what would we want to accomplish in that particular discussion?
Well, I'm hoping
I
that,
would want to talk about the Mill Valley thing, and along that line, because Sustainable Environment met last night, I'm on that commission, and the citizen group that's out there gave us a whole lot of handouts, and one of them is, David, do you think, George, have you sent us, or could you send us? He did an excerpt from the Mill Valley where he pulled out some key points. There's a chart there, Mike, the kinds of charts that we use, and it has preferences for location configurations. Like first we'd want it on the co-located on current existing facilities, and then roof mounted, and then building mounted. It's got some nice things in there that he pulled out as an excerpt that would help us, because that's a big document, that would help us as we look at the Mill Valley and help us focus our conversation. If we could also get a hold, do you think we could get a hold of this, or have you already sent it?
I don't have an electronic version.
Can you check with George?
Get the city to photocopy it, but I can ask him if he's getting an electronic version.
Okay, well, I mean, it's printed. I'm sure this is an electronic version. I have a copy, which is now all marked up because I've gone through it.
well,
But,
Ann sent the Mill Valley ordinance out to everybody.
Is this,
Send it to the city clerk, so I'm sure.
That's a focus excerpt on.
this is a focus excerpt. It's not the whole Mill Valley
You
thing.
see it online?
The Mill Valley one is there, yes.
Yeah, I'm sure it's online. Another article that I found that was pretty helpful is by the UK government, entitled Mobile Phone Base Stations, Radio Waves and Health, and it says recent as May 2019, and it gets into a lot of what we've been talking about, at least in related to those concerns, and how it's how they monitor, et cetera, exposure. And, it might help to be at least basically educated, because there are a lot of not substantiated studies out there as well. So I'm worried about reading a lot of those, and we need to find scientifically sound studies to look at. So
Why don't we, let's, as a suggestion, start with the Mill Valley ordinance.
Yep.
As a discussion point. We'll put it, we got 3 weeks to the next meeting. We'll put that on the agenda, Mike, for the next one. And if anybody doesn't have a copy, let Ann know, and you can either mail it out or whatever. But let's, I know this is gonna be a continuing hot topic, I think. So we might as well keep it going. So I think the Mill Valley is a good place to start. Let's do that for the next one, so.
yeah,
Okay.
I agree with that. I think
Super.
that's good. It's more focused on what our what our responsibilities are as a PMT
Yeah,
commission to look at other ordinances. I think so. That's helpful.
great, okay. All right, well, with that, let's move on to the number 5 item here, draft subdivision code review. Mike, you're up again.
So this is nothing's really changed from last time except that we put it in an ordinance form. So we did have our cluster, I guess it'd be conservation subdivision and traditional subdivision options. Those were already in ordinance form because they're in a different chapter than the crux of the subdivision code. But the whole document's been converged into one ordinance, and that's really the change since last time. We're just getting it ready to go for public hearing. There were a number of things that we discussed last time. I think the block length. I did do a little bit of research just around town on typical block lengths, and it really varies from neighborhood to neighborhood. But I didn't prepare a PowerPoint that shows that, and so I can do that next time if I know Nels and Wendy and I had a little bit of a conversation on another document, so I can get with Nels and we can get some examples from other places, but it'd be helpful to show some aerials and dimensions on some of our neighborhoods, so I was planning to do that.
Mike, I have a question on your block length measurements, because typically I measure blocks from the curb to the curb and not from the center line to the street to the center line of the street. Where are your measurements measuring? Where?
We would typically measure curb to curb.
Curb to curb. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So we're in agreement then. Yeah.
It's one of the things that Wendy and I love to talk about back in the day when we were teaching, was that Portland, the whole downtown of Portland, has the smallest blocks basically in America, 200 feet by 200 feet. It's 1 acre. And so there's a wonderful city that isn't anywhere near close to 200 feet. And we all get excited about that because most of us urban people think that the coolest things in the city are always on the corner. The stuff in between isn't as exciting as the corner. Well, if you've got blocks that are 600 by 600, you have a lot less corners than if you have blocks that are 200 by 200. So that means that downtown Portland's really exciting. Lots of corner lots, corner businesses.
And even Manhattan, which has, as you know, Nels, rectangular blocks where the really long dimension is where all the row houses historically were, or a lot of people live, but the shopping avenues are all the short side of that rectangle. So it gives more frequency of intersections. So definitely for commercial districts, et cetera, it's important to have a lot of intersections if you want pedestrian activity. Residential get a little longer sometimes.
We'll help Michael get some stuff together, and we'll have some real fun next meeting.
So then, Mike, after that, you're pretty much ready, unless we have any additional changes, you're ready to go
I think
ahead
we're
and-
about there. I mean, we
Public
had
hearing.
the subdivision review committee, and that was kind of our final step, and we've incorporated some of their comments. still plan on maybe having one more conversation on some of the recommendations that we didn't end up, going with.
Okay.
So, yeah, I mean, we can have that next meeting and then probably one more review, and then I'd like to schedule it for public hearing.
Super. Okay, great. Very good. All right, thank you. Next item, Joel, you're up. Transportation Commission meeting report.
The last meeting of the Transportation Commission was on January 9th. There are two items that I think would be of interest. One was the request for vacation of North Howard Street right-of-way between E Street and Homestead Street. The Howard Street just sort of goes up there and stops, and then there's fragments of Howard Street to the north beyond that. The reason it stops is that beyond E Street, the terrain drops off precipitously, and it's never made any sense to put a street through. The city engineering said that it would have required at least 15 feet of fill to have put a street meeting the maximum slope requirements through there, so it's never been built. The reason for vacation was a proposal for some infill development. It's a long distance between Homestead and E Street, and there's some possibility for putting some houses in the middle with access off of Homestead Street. The proposed lots in the middle, however, were substandard. Did not meet requirements. One of the reasons for vacation would be to be able to add the land that would be vacated to the area of the lots to bring them up to the required number of square feet. One of the things I found very interesting about this is when I looked up on Google Maps to try to figure out exactly where it was. The first thing that I saw when I looked at Howard Street on Google Maps was E Street Sledding Hill. It's an area that right-of-way has been well used for recreation, enough so to make it on Google Maps. There were a number of other concerns that were raised, and one of them is a general unwillingness on the part of Transportation Commission in most cases to give up public right-of-way when we don't know what the future uses of this land might at some time be. There was a motion to approve the vacation of the right-of-way, which failed on a 4-2 vote. And that was where we left it. We did not approve the vacation of the right-of-way. Ultimately, it would be up to the city council to do what they will. The second item was the discussion of the intersection of A and Baker. That's been one that has had a number of accidents, including pedestrian injury accidents, because there's plenty of pedestrians running around there with all the apartments to the north. There is a local safety improvement grant program that is based significantly on accident history, and the city is interested in making application for that. And the proposed engineering action is to put in what they refer to as a small diameter roundabout. And so the required action is a letter of recommendation from the Transportation Commission, which we agreed to provide. So the next meeting of the Transportation Commission will be, I believe, on the 13th of February.
Great, thank
In
you.
this meeting, in this room.
Those small roundabouts, I see them in West Seattle, which I spend a fair amount of time in, and they are effective. You have to go very slow around those. So.
Well, and in this case, there is a proposal for, I believe, some lane divider between the east and westbound lane, which would involve a place of refuge for crossing pedestrians.
Yeah, that's great.
So that was brought up at one of the council committee meetings. And since I was at Sustainable Environment last night, I was not at the council meeting. It might be out there on the agenda as a consent item or an item of consideration.
It was approved on consent agenda.
Okay, yeah, because I did see it in the committee meeting.
So, last item, Mike, any correspondence or announcements?
Nothing from staff, no.
Okay, great. Well, anything else for the good of the order? All right, with that, the meeting is adjourned. Thanks very much.
Thank you.